Hi, this is Maria Williams. Today I'm going to share with you two cards that I made with the Bloomin' Hearts Thinlit dies, and I colored them in with the Stampin' Up markers to achieve a watercolor look. And I used the Fabulous 4 stamp set, specifically the It's Your Day sentiment from that stamp set. And I also ended up using a sentiment from Petite Pears. I'm starting out with two hearts that I cut out of watercolor paper with the Bloomin' Hearts Thinlit dies. It's important to use watercolor paper for best results because you can add a lot of water, which allows the ink to spread and create the watercolor look we are looking for. I have a small bowl of water that I'm going to use with a couple of small paintbrushes. You could use a water brush, but I find that I have more control with a regular paintbrush and a bowl of water, plus I can clean my brush more thoroughly in between colors. The colors that I'm using are Old Olive, Daffodil Delight, Pumpkin Pie, Melon Mambo, and Real Red. I've grabbed a large Stampin' block that I'm going to use as my palette. All I have to do is take the marker, which I'm starting out with Old Olive, scribble onto the block, and as you can see, the ink transfers from the marker to the block very easily. I can then take my paintbrush, dip it in the water, and then pick up some of the ink and go to the paper. You actually want to wet down the watercolor paper first and get a little bit of water. You don't want it totally saturated, but you definitely want a little bit of water. And then take a little bit more water, pick up the ink from the marker that's on the block, and then color onto the paper. I'm not too worried about getting ink on the areas that are not going to be that color in the end, because since it's a fairly light color and the other areas are going to be filled in with more intense colors, the intense colors will cover up any of the green that I might get there. The only thing to watch out for is that I do want those areas to be dry when I use the markers. As you saw, when I was finished with the green, I cleaned up my block with a piece of paper. I did end up going back and touching up. That's why my block has color on it again. But in between colors, you do want to clean the block with a paper towel or with a baby wipe. I've now started filling in the little heart shapes on the die with the Real Red marker. Again, I did not wet down those areas. I just let them dry and then grab the marker and I'm coloring directly onto those little hearts. If the hearts are too dark, I can pick up a little bit of water on a small paintbrush and dab it on there. I have to be careful that I don't put too much water on those little hearts, otherwise that red color will spread into some of the other areas. Once I'm happy with the way all those areas are, I'm going to move on to the other colors. I'm going to use the Daffodil Delight to fill in the centers of those outline flowers. And I'm going to use the Pumpkin Pie to color in the other flower shapes. So here I'm doing the Daffodil Delight just in the middle. Those outline flowers are going to be colored with the Melon Mambo, and I'm not really going to do much watercoloring on any of these areas, but I am going to apply a little bit of water on the Melon Mambo so that the color doesn't look too intense, just too flat compared to the rest of the heart. If you were to get too much water and too much color onto an area on your die cut, you can always grab a dry paper towel and dab at it very carefully, and the paper towel will absorb all of the excess water and the excess dye from the die cut. You can use a heat tool to help you dry the die cut while you are working on it if it becomes too wet, or you can just let it air dry for a little bit. In this case, I never did have to use my heat gun until before I assembled the die cut flowers onto this main die cut. So like I said, as long as you don't use too much water, you don't need to dry in between the different colors. I'm continuing on with the Melon Mambo onto the outlines of the flowers, and as you will see, I did take a paintbrush and get a little bit of water and kind of dab around so that they wouldn't be so dark. Now I noticed that I had missed some of the green areas, so I'm going back with a little bit more of the old olive that I scribbled onto the block onto the paper to fill in those areas. I'm applying also a little bit of water onto the melon mambo, like I said earlier, and basically just trying to finish up all these different colors before I attach the die cut flowers from the set. Now that I'm happy with the way my die cut looks, I have gone ahead and cut the flowers that will go onto the big die cut. I've also cut these out of watercolor paper, the same as the larger heart die cut, and I'm going to use Melon Mambo to color them in. Like with the old olive, I'm just scribbling with the marker onto my acrylic block, and then I'm going to pick up some water. First of all, I'm going to make sure that my brush is really nice and clean and dry it off a little bit. And then I'm going to pick up some water, wet the flowers, and then I'm going to pick up some of the ink from the block and apply it very randomly onto the flowers. I'm not taking much care to do this. If my finger touches the watercolor paper, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to affect the end look. So I'm just very quickly putting the color on, and I'm going to do all of them and then add more color as I want to intensify the color on the flowers. Once I'm happy with the way the flowers look, I'm going to set them aside and let them dry and then complete the card. For the second card, I decided to go a more monochromatic route, so I chose Bermuda Bay to color all the flowers and the blooms. Like before, I'm scribbling with the marker onto the block and getting a good bit of color since I have a lot of areas to color. I'm wetting down the cut out flowers, which were also cut with out of watercolor paper, and this time I decided to use a stylus to hold the flowers in place by sticking the stylus through the middle of the flower. And I'm working on a surface, I can't remember the name of this mat, but anyway, it's kind of a plastic mat. So I'm just, like before, wetting down the flowers and then applying the color all around, and then I will go back and add more color as needed. Now that I'm done watercoloring the die cut flowers, I'm going to wipe my surface down really well with a paper towel and move on to coloring the rest of the blooms and the hearts on the die cut heart. I'm applying the marker directly onto the paper, and then I'm taking a smaller brush than I used before and applying a little bit of water. I got a little aggressive with the water, so I'm just taking a paper towel and dabbing up some of the water that has pooled on those little blooms so that it dries it up a little bit, and then I'm going to continue coloring in a different area. I did experiment with adding some water to the watercolor paper before coloring with the marker. I did put the water on, dab it a little bit with a paper towel, and then apply the marker. And I found that this worked pretty well. I like the results, but I'm not going to suggest necessarily this technique because I'm not really sure what it will do to the marker. The tip of the marker is porous, and so I don't know how much of the water it's actually absorbing into the tip. So I don't know what it will do to the marker long term. But of course, it is something that you can try if you're willing to take the chance. I have used the marker since, and it seems to be perfectly fine. Now that all my watercoloring and all my coloring is done, I'm going to take the dry watercolored flowers and place them on the main die cut. I like to do this before I glue them down so that once I grab my glue, I can just quickly lift each one of the flowers, put a little glue underneath, and put the flower back down rather than glue one down and then try to fit another one and then glue it down. It seems to go faster when I do it this way. So now that my focal point is ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and put together my cards and come back and show you the finished product. So here are my two completed cards. This is the first one that I made using the Real Red, Melon Mambo, Daffodil Delight, and Pumpkin Pie, and Old Olive, which is the same green I used on the other card. I've mounted the heart onto a rectangle of white cardstock, added a strip of paper from the Neutrals DSP stack, a little bit of black and white twine, some sequins from the Italics Sequins collection, and of course a sentiment from Fabulous 4. And this piece of paper is from the Have a Cuppa Designer Series paper stack. For this card, which I love the soft look of it, I used a Bermuda Bay card base and then mounted the heart onto a white piece of cardstock. And I used a little strip of paper from a discontinued collection from the holiday catalog and a strip of paper from Have a Cuppa, which is the same collection that I used for the other card. The sentiment is from the Petite Pears stamp set. And I think that these two cards demonstrate how a very similar design can be used for two totally different types of cards. I hope you like these cards and that you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up. And for more information and more pictures of the cards, please visit my blog at emmawilliams.stampinup.net/blog. Thanks for watching.